right, welcome everybody, and welcome to today's session and webinar called Stories That Heal, Cultural Perspectives and Creative Approaches in Global Mental Health. My name is Sandra Ferreira and I'm the Global Network Manager for the Global Mental Health Peer Network. For anyone that's new and isn't part of the GMHPN and wants a quick description about who we are an international organization that builds capacity among people with lived experience of a mental health condition. We do this through peer-to-peer support, peer-to-peer mentorship, and empowerment. I am ecstatic, delighted, overjoyed to be joined by Professor Erminia Colucci today, and also my co-facilitator and friend, Prof. Sharma, both of whom I admire, I draw inspiration from, and am genuinely grateful to share this space with. Today, we will be centering and highlighting lived experience and what true authentic engagement looks like, looks and feels like within research, elevating not only lived experience, but the human experience. I hope you will leave here today feeling the essence and impact of the story shared, as well as your own story. I have been in advocacy for some time now, and when I saw Erminia's presentation a few months back, I was honestly floored. In a good way. Erminia showcases a skill, a care that few people grasp. It truly transcends mental health, mental illness, and it speaks a language of true healing and wellness. And we truly are honored to have her on this webinar today. Before I move to setting the stage, I just want to briefly mention that we are recording the session. The session will be shared on YouTube after this. So to set the stage, draw the curtains. I want to pop straight into introductions. I'd first like to ask Professor Erminia if you could do a short introduction for us, followed by Part, please.
Such a lovely introduction. Emotional when you say that, so it was very lovely. And I probably don't need to say much more. I think we should go straight into the lovely activities that you have planned for this day, and people can read more about my background in my web page, my institution, if you like. But just briefly, I am, as I mentioned, professor of visual psychology and cultural governmental health. I'm a very interdisciplinary kind of scholar, as I began as a clinical community psychologist, so I have a clinical background, and then I did a PhD in cultural psychiatry, followed by actually before that I did a master's in advanced statistics, so I'm a little bit an unusual arts-based and visual researcher, and then I did MPhil in visual anthropology, and the work I'm going to be talking about today draws very much from the kind of mixing together this the discipline and learning from different disciplines. My research has mainly been in low and middle income countries, particularly in South Asia, Southeast Asia, but also in Ghana, and also with the ethnic minorities and the refugees populations. And during the presentation to that, I give a bit of an overview of some of my projects. You will get a sense about what my activist research has been taking place, and with my focus on my research. So thank you again so much for inviting me. It was a very honor to meet you both in Sri Lanka, and it's lovely to be here back today and meeting many other people online. So thank you for giving me this space.
Thanks so much, Erminia. Prof?
Thanks. I think I'm so excited to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Parth. My pronouns are he, they. I am a decolonial researcher, liberation therapist, and a culture worker. I dabble in interdisciplinary research like Erminia, and have a very strong passion for filmmaking and documentary filmmaking specifically, and arts as a method of activism. I worked within the South Asia space for disability justice, and I'm also part of the peer network. I joined in 2024, was briefly the chairperson for Asia Oceania, and now I'm a mentor. And I'm here with some of my favorite people on this call, so I'm very excited to talk to you a little bit more.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Parth and Erminia, for the introductions. Really looking forward to today's session, obviously. So just to give the brief background, how it's going to look today. So we're going to start with an activity called Frame by Frame. This activity is designed to set the stage or set the scene for Erminia's work, specifically in visual anthropology and filmmaking. We do encourage you, if possible, as well, to put cameras on if you are comfortable. Obviously, if you're not comfortable, or if it's a network connection issue, we totally understand if you want to keep it off. Then we will move to Professor Erminia's presentation, where she will be sharing some of the work that she's currently involved in. And then moving on to exploring authentic allyship and a deep dive with Erminia. So in this space, we will be able to also field questions or comments. And I'd also like to encourage you to post comments throughout the session in the chat, and we will get back to these when we have that space. And to end off today, we will end with a group reflection titled, "What Story Do I Want to Share?" So a really full, fruitful session ahead. I'm excited. I think I've said that 4 times already. But regardless, yeah, so very happy to be here. We're just going to go to housekeeping quickly. Just the general housekeeping considerations for everyone, please. To mention, I have already mentioned the comments in the chat, and then when we get to the deep dive section, we can address these comments, etc. And I want to speak specific to potential triggers or feeling overwhelmed through the session. If you do have these feelings, please feel free to pop off and pop back in to self-soothe, to find comfort. I also want to extend this beyond this webinar. If you leave the webinar and you are feeling uneasy, please reach out to me directly. I will share my contact in the chat, and I'm happy to help in terms of peer support through our organization as well. Right. At this stage, I'd like to hand over to the fabulous Prof to take the first activity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited about this. All right. As you can see on the screen, there is one still, it's an animation of one small frame. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the next 5 to 10 minutes to just interact a little bit, get to know each other. We're an intimate group today, so we have some opportunity for some people to also spotlight, unmute, and speak about their experiences. The way that this activity works is it's called frame by frame. When I was doing my bachelor's in journalism and filmmaking and media, essentially, we were taught that, the importance of having that 24 frames per second and importance of filmmaking and the theories around this. But sometimes all it took for us to sit was to sit with one frame and what meaning we attached to it and what meaning we were drawing from that. And we were in classes of 100, 120 students, and each of us would have a very different interpretation of a single frame from a film, a single frame from a documentary, or from a photo essay. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you one frame from some of Erminia's work that we've collated, that we've checked from the stuff that she's done. And we're going to be opening the floor to you. As you look at the image, type down what do you think is the story within that, right? It doesn't need to be something which is related to what Erminia is doing. That she'll come to in a second. But it is your interpretation of what's going on in the image, right? For example, look at the image in front of you right now. It's mountains, it's the sea, and there's stuff going on around it. What do you think is happening there? What does the movement look like? If it helps you, you can also attach characters if you want to. You can also attach a plot, what happened before that image, what's happening during it, what are the feelings that come to you. But we want to share this with each other and sort of stitch up a narrative of how are we, all of us here on the call right now, similar or different in our perspectives, okay? This is going to be slightly interactive, so I'd really appreciate if you can pop that in the chat. But with emojis right now, give me a thumbs up if the activity made sense to you. I will wait. Okay, I see 1 thumbs up. What about the others? I see 2. This now feels like an auction. Do we have a 3? We have a 3. Fantastic. We're going to go towards that. I see something in the chat. Great, Madhu's put it in the chat. All right. This is the image in front of you. I'll give an image description. There is a tree, there is a hut, there are people sitting doing an activity, and there is a caption on the image which reads, "We take it to the ancestors to see why it happened that way." Take a second. Look at the image. Look at the trees, the soil, the hut, the people. What do you think is going on here? Pop that in the chat. What do you think is the story that is going on in this picture today? If it helps, you can draw context from the caption of that image. But feel free to write your interpretation, yeah? Take a second. All right. How are we feeling about that? Okay, we have something in the chat. Anastasia has written, it looks grounding, connecting with our previous generations to understand why things happen the way they do now. That's very beautiful, Anastasia. How many people feel similar to what has been shared in the chat? Does the image ground you? How does the image make you feel? What's coming up? I see a couple things in the chat. Okay. Madhi said that it almost feels like it's a look at generational experiences, but in a more harrowing way. Okay, that's a strong word, Madhi. Thanks for sharing that in the chat. Arya has written that it looks mysterious and unsettling, almost as if we don't know what's happening next. There's that uncertainty coming in again there. Jeffrey has written another way to process life, rather than just you, to experience it connected to your people of the past. That's very beautiful, Jeffrey. Thank you for adding that. There's a bunch of mixed emotions happening. What is running down the wall? Sandra, is that a question, or is that what comes up as a story?
I think it's context to the story, perhaps.
Fantastic. That's beautiful. Thanks for adding that. We see Sneha, who's written, it's revered within a community. That's beautiful. Mamta has written that it's connecting to our roots. Kiran has written that feels like it's related to making meaning out of grief or profound uncertainty, like something sorrowful has happened. It's very beautiful as well. Is there someone willing to talk a little bit about their experience? You can just raise your hand if you've not added that to the chat yet, or you'll just like to provide some context as to what was the process of you coming up with this thought as you saw the image. Till then, I'll read out what Vibhuti has put. Looks like that tree has been there for a while now and has seen a lot. That's very beautiful, Vibhuti. Do you want to perhaps talk about that? Absolutely. Go ahead, Arya.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. The reason why I said what I said, right? It looks mysterious and unsettling. It's almost as if, okay, I'll tell you where I'm coming from. So this scene kind of reminds me of my village. So I come from a village in South India, and it's got similar colors. It's got trees. It's got like smaller houses. So there are no buildings over there at all, right? And I remember going there one summer, and it looked really like that. And um, the place I was coming from was, for a lot of us, our villages take us back to a time in the past where our ancestors lived, where generations before us stayed. And almost and going to your village in India, especially, is a ritual, right? It's like a huge thing. It's a huge summer break, and we all go there. What I've seen when I talk to people who go to villages is that your world, your modern world, doesn't hold those answers that your villages do, right? And you never know what's going to come up next. And when you go there, it's almost as if you're going back in time and you're uncovering a lot of things or a lot of information about yourself, your family, your communities that are not accessible in the city, right? So I think the tree, the kind of brick kind of structure around it almost seemed like a well for me. There was a house inside, and there's like a lot of landscape and a lot of trees in the background as well. It's kind of giving me that visual of almost as if modern time has come to a standstill, right? And we don't know what's going to happen next. And I'm just holding and just with like bated breath about what is this going to uncover next.
That's very beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And I relate to that on
Thank
so
you.
many levels, because even from my side, right, when I think about this image, in where I come from, the community that I come from, it's called a chopal, where older elders sit next to trees like the banyan tree. And that's where you have shared wisdom and you have shared time that young people learn, people of the community get together to share stories and grief and, even just conflict resolution. A lot of that happens in trees, under trees, that area. So that's very, very beautiful. Thanks for adding that. We have a second more if anyone wants to briefly share theirs as well. One more person. Anyone wants to raise the hands, unmute? All right, fantastic. What we're going to do is we're going to take another look at the chat, right? Arya shared such a beautiful experience of their village, where they come from, and what that uncertainty looks like to them. Look at everything that's coming out in the chat. I mean, this is one single image of trees with people there, and yet by the prompt of that one caption, right, we're all able to see so many things together. We're all able to relate it to our own context. We're all able to hold that cultural sensitivity of, okay, this may be something that is related to grief or uncertainty or healing. And people are not shy away from telling you that this image does provoke something in them, right? It's not necessarily the most grounding, but could be uncertain as well. And that's so beautiful. Imagine, like, there are so many of us on this call right now, and all of us come from similar or different contexts, yet we're able to hold that with each other and that space with each other. That's exactly what happens with Armenia's work. And that's exactly what happened in Sri Lanka when Sandra and I saw a documentary and parts of the documentaries through which this image is also from. So this is from the Harmony documentary on movement, where we'll come to that in just a second, what that is. But we saw a bunch of, we saw so many people, right? We saw people from Southeast Asia. We saw people in healing forms, people talking about grief, people talking about their own experiences. And there were moments where both Sandra and I sat and we were slightly teary-eyed that, okay, we are seeing stories that we relate to on a completely different level, but those are human stories that touched us. Those are stories that were created through these documentaries. And that's why I'm so excited to now hand this over to Erminia. And just briefly, Armenia's, you can go and read her bio. I think I don't think I can do justice to that right now. But what I can say is that when we were sitting in that hall, right? And you have that access to the space when you're able to interact with the art, with the artist, with the filmmaker, and with the people featured in the documentary. It really moves you. It really makes you think about the power of filmmaking and the power of whose story do you want to tell, who is the person behind the screen, and how are we moving forward. So Armenia, you can go read a little bit about her from her webpage. She's done a bunch of work that you'll find really interesting. But now I'll hand it over to Armenia to tell you a little bit about her work and to give you more context as to what visual documentary making is, visual anthropology is. So over to you, Armenia.
Thank you so much, Part. What a fantastic exercise, actually. I'm going to be using that in my visual psychology courses I do, because I think it's a fantastic activity. And thank you to Arya for sharing a very, very lovely way of describing how you responded, and others who also commented in the chat. So it was a very, very great way of starting looking into the topic of today. So I'm going to be sharing slides. There we go. I'm gonna make it bigger. Okay, continue to share. Okay, so can you see everything nicely?
Yes, it's visible.
Wonderful, okay. And I'm gonna try to move this under. Gonna just move things around so that I actually can see the slides myself. Okay, great. Okay, so the wonderful title that you gave, so that's a title representation, stories that heal. So I'm going to be talking from my perspective from culture and global mental health. I'm going to be giving a little bit of an overview about how this came about and where I'm heading with it. So just starting with giving a little kind of historical background, because all research methods in any mental health discipline are based on some kind of epistemology and history, and they're located in a particular time. So the arts-based and visual methods, I like to use this definition by Levi, where she indicated they are about holistic approaches to research. She says the story began at the intersection of social justice movement, theoretical advances, and paradigm expansion. And it's important to emphasize this aspect of social justice because, as you will see, and also as was mentioned by Part and my own way of framing my work, it is very much based on social justice movement, as I define an activist kind of research. Now, there is many definitions, many different ways of looking about what we mean by arts-based inquiry, but fundamentally, they are about any kind of art forms which are essential to the research process itself and they are central in different phases of the research. And the important part here is about being essential and being central. So they are not seen as an add-on, one element of many others, but they are fundamentally the main or the only method for in the research process. And this can be starting from formulating research questions, such as determining what are the needs in a particular community, in a particular group, so setting the needs, the priorities, and deciding basically what the research is going to be about. Arts can be used to generate and collect data, to analyze data, to present and disseminate the research findings, and as research funding themselves. Oops. Okay, so arts defined in a chapter I wrote a while ago. Art is a way of knowing and showing. Now, art forms used in research are very varied. Fundamentally, anything can be used for research purposes, yeah, in any art form. So in this case, you can see some drawing from a little project in Japan around youth suicide using manga. I'm imagining all you're familiar with the manga, which is something very popular in Japan. So I thought it would be a very good way to try to talk about a complex topic, a sensitive topic, using something that young Japanese are used to. But drawing probably has been used more than other methods, but poetry, photography, film, music, anything really can be used, as mentioned. At the moment, I'm exploring with one of my PhD students and as a collaborator in Lithuania. For next year, we have a conference on suicide in Lithuania, and using ceramic as a research method. So anything can be used. And also looking at the slide before, around the different stages of the research, you could be using an art form, for example, to formulating research question, and another art form to collect data, another art form to then disseminate the data. Now, there are different reasons, different advantages. If I had more time, I would love to know from you about what you think are these potential advantages, potential benefit of using arts-based method. But for the sake of time, to have time later for more question interaction, I will share with you some of the reasons why I became so interested in using an arts-based method, in spite of, as I mentioned before, starting from a very statistical background, then becoming a mixed method researcher, and now fundamentally an arts-based visual researcher. So to begin with, arts, including visual methods, are a very powerful medium to explore in depth and include marginalized and even silenced perspective. Again, as mentioned before, activist research. They are inclusive of people who are unable to use or use efficiently writing and reading as a primary means of communication. They can allow access to multiple and complex meanings and system of beliefs that may be otherwise inaccessible. They can make the report of research outcomes easier, more effective and impactful, and accessible. They can also challenge preconceived and dominant perspective, basically challenge the status quo and provide a new perspective and understanding that cannot always be translated into words and or numbers. They can build a very high level of intimacy, empathy, and mutual understanding, reducing the distance between the researched and the researcher. And they also have a capability to evoke emotions that we just saw with just one image that you looked at, right? Promote reflection, transform the way that people think. And so art-based research has in itself as what we can call a transformational capability. And it's also able to, there are tools to engage participants in a more empowering research process. So again, as an active agent, something very important to me, about which I will talk more later when I talk about participatory visual methods. But for me, one of the main appeal, in addition to this, was also that arts as an appeal beyond academia. The turn towards artistic, visual, digital forms of representation bring research to broader audience. As an activist researcher, also coming from a lower social class background, it's very important that what we do within academia with our research does become useful and impactful outside of academia. Now, as for any research, including the most sophisticated statistical research, there are limitations. Some of the limitations I want to highlight here are around the time. They can be time consuming. There is not much guidance. When I started in this work, I had no guidance at all in mental health, particularly about how to analyze data or how to run workshop. So it's a lot of learning. Funders, sometimes colleagues, peers may not fully understand the value of using this method. Because there are unconventional approaches, ethics committee are not familiar usually with this method, although they're progressively becoming more familiar. And so we also have to work with ethics committee to help understand about the ethics around this kind of research. And also for some participants, they might be more challenging. And researchers also need to learn new skills. As I mentioned before, after my PhD in cultural psychiatry, I retrained as a visual anthropologist, but I keep learning new skills as I do more workshops and explore other arts-based method. But in spite of all the limitations I just mentioned, they still are a very powerful tool for activists and applied research in global mental health and suicide. Now, I just want to give an example about the process. So using the same kind of example, using theater, a community theater called the forum theater, the same methodology here in these examples have been used in two different stages of the research process. So in the example in your left, this methodology was used to generate data and promote social change in a participatory action research approach. This was a research project looking around domestic violence among Indian immigrant women in Australia. And in this approach, we used this community theater as a way, so use short theater plays as a way to generate data in the community. You can see here one of the photos from the community theater. In the other example, the research was around suicide guidelines for people from migrant refugee background. In this case, the research was based on a mixed method approach using the Adelphi method and expert consensus method. So the data were collected in that way, but we used the same methodology, community theater, forum theater, to present the finding, taking the findings in the community, and to that process, generate new data. So to say that the same kind of methodology can be an arts-based method, can be used in different stages for different purposes, okay? And that's important for us to look at before we move in more specifically in visual methods, which is going to be the focus of my presentation today. Now, initially, as I mentioned, I was using more statistical quantitative methods, a mixed method, and so I was using art in that context more to complement my research output. So it was not an central part, it was more to complement what I was doing with other methods. For example, and a lot of my research initially has been in India, in South India, and North India. In this case, it was in Haridwar in the north of India. I was doing a research around spirituality and suicide using a mixed method research approach. And while I was there, I love cameras, and I had my camera with me, and I was filming some of the activity. I was researching in the ashram where I was based in Haridwar. I was taking photographs. So then I was publishing, analyzing my data. And in the meantime, I also was doing some exhibitions around, this exhibition called Haridwar, A Spiritual Journey. I made a short documentary to be shown as part of the exhibition. In this case, my kind of more artistic output were sitting next to my research output. They were not part of the research process as such, some of the photos from my exhibition in Melbourne. But then I realized I did not just want to incorporate images in anthropological and psychological discourses, but my aim was to make use of the image as a method and of film as a process of discovery and change. And that kind of shifted largely the way I started using this method. So I started looking at ethnographic film as a standalone research and dissemination public engagement method in mental health. In an applied public and activist visual anthropology and psychology, which is what I know the name I kind of given to the kind of work that I do. But fundamentally, it's film as research for change, because the final objective of all my work, and I'm sure all of your work, is around having change, and film as a research tool for achieving that change or contributing to that change. So I funded something called the Movement, Images that Inspire Change, which aims to use arts-based and visual methodologies to promote, support, and ignite action and change, particularly in mental health and suicide prevention. And the examples I'm going to be giving today, most of them are all in this website, so do not worry about writing down. Of course, you can watch the video recording after, but also you can just click later. You will find the links to most of the things that I am talking about. So with this idea, then I embarked in my first completely visual research project, which was called Breaking the Chains, which was looking around human rights violations in mental health in Indonesia. Now, I think Anto or Augusto, I don't know if you refer to him, was going to be, was trying to be with us today. I'm not sure he's going to be able to join us, but I'm sure most of you have met him. So in Indonesia, pasung is a term used to initially to refer to the physical restraint or confined of criminals, crazy and dangerously aggressive people. Basically, it's a different form of restraint and containment, which are very widespread in Indonesia. They are also present in countries, and of course forms of restraint and confinement of different kind of style happen in all countries, including in very high income countries. But my work, as mentioned before, focus in low middle income countries and migrants and refugee populations. So my example will all be coming, except for one, we all be coming in a kind of in this context. So when I started doing this work, my main project was around looking at what are the cultural meanings, what are the function of practice of restraint, and like such a pasung, and also looking at the social and political activism taking place in a particular area of Indonesia, in West Java, which is called the Cianjur. So I started following an organization called Komunitas Sehat Jiwa and see what actually they were doing to be able to free the people who they were finding who were under practice of physical restraint and confinement. The outcomes of this, the first visual research project, the main one was a film called Breaking the Chains, Human Rights in Mental Health, which some of you might have seen. And I also published first an invited actually piece by Lancet Psychiatry, which was very reassuring for me to see the Lancet Psychiatry. It was 2016, almost 10 years ago. I was interested to know about this kind of approach in mental health research. But more recently, I also have published a paper where I share my reflection on the making of this ethnographic documentary and also some of the challenges and the decisions I had to make. So please have a look. It's free, both of them are freely available, so you can look more in depth if you are interested. Then I was very, very lucky to have a dear friend in Indonesia, Ervita, who was a psychiatrist, and she told me, Erminia, you have to go to East Java, which was quite a long way from where I was, to meet this man called Anto. Augusto, I don't know how you refer to him, so I'm going to use Anto, and who had been also experiencing pasung in different stages, and she thought it would be an interesting person for me to include in the research. So I spoke with Anto. We agreed about me spending some days in his house with his family, and since then we have been collaborating since 2011 now, for almost 15 years. So when I met Anto, because Anto was kind of trying to himself making sense about his experience of being chained. So you can see some of his one of his painting. He was drawing, he was painting, he was writing a diary. So that became such an interesting story on his own that completely changed. So then we made a film together where Anto became the co-director of his film, and we've been actually working on this film for 7 years, and then finally we have released it. So it kind of follows a bit of his journey since when I met him till when he's completed his master. Now he's in UK doing a PhD. In addition to this photo here, just last month in London, I published a book around suicide, and there is an area where I talk about Anto's work. So we were celebrating this release of the book, and also Anto's work also be part of this work. We also have written a paper together where you looking at the story of chaining and freedom in Indonesia told through painting, poetry, and narration, which also is freely available. And then there are several photographs and other work that you can also have a look. Now, this work was an important work because when I was doing Breaking the Chains, and then I presented this work, Breaking the Chains, in an anthropological conference in Manchester, where I met with Ursula Reed, who had done kind of similar work, but in Ghana. We realized we had similar experiences, understanding of looking at how people were experiencing severe mental health issues, both in Ghana and Indonesia. They seem to be often, the family, to be caught between faith healers, traditional healers, and mental health professionals. So usually these kind of figures were not working together. In fact, in my experience in Indonesia, they were often working against each other. So from that, we decided to apply for fundings, and we were funded by the UKRI in UK, in terms of doing visual research, looking specifically about positive example, are there example of good practice or collaboration between mental health workers and healers to improve mental health care and reduce coercion and restraint both in Ghana and Indonesia. So from this began Together for Mental Health, which was a comparative visual study, which looked at attempt made by mental health workers of different kind and faith-based traditional healers to establish collaboration to prevent use of coercion and improve care for people experiencing mental illness in Ghana and Indonesia. So this project was an applied activist interdisciplinary visual research project based on ethnographic documentary and participatory video, building on a breaking the chains approach I developed for Indonesia, but also a digital storytelling approach, which I will talk more about later, which is called Funding Our Way. So the initial stage of this project was around, when we had advisory groups and steering committee, but advisory groups in both countries as well as an international steering committee. In this case, we have a photo as meeting the advisory group in Ghana, where we wanted to explore already before going in the field, having some kind of collaboration, co-production in terms of where to go, what to film, who should be included, and starting collecting some of the data. Then we had filmed the field observation and interviews with the person with experience of mental illness and coercion or restraint, carers, healers, mental health workers, and other key stakeholders. So you see here some images from Ghana and Indonesia. And we used what I call a staged ethic consent to observe and film the person, where the person was actually given asked to make a decision with a yes or no about every element of their identity, so that they could actually have full choices around what they wanted to reveal about themselves, including potentially nothing, so there could be not at all nothing about identity could be included. And this kind of staged consent was also retaken. So when we were going back in the field, we'll double check again with the person if they wanted to continue with the same consent that they previously given, or if they wanted to change their consent, which obviously was in the local language. And you can read a bit about this kind of stage consent in a paper that my colleague Susan Anser and I have written around ethics guidelines for bishop psychology. The output of this film project as well are a different kind. There is two films, short films, papers, training materials, screening guide, many presentations, and so on. So we are still kind of releasing a few things. So the two main films, one of which was mentioned before in the presentation before, is Harmony Healing Together, which is an Indonesian film, and Kaboma, Little Medicine, Little Prayer. So these are the two main ethnographic films produced from this project. And then we also have short films. There was so much material collected in both countries that then I really wanted to kind of make sure that we could use create other stories. So there is Walak Krunon, Healing the Mothers of Lost Soul, and then 3 other short films. So actually we just finished the other story as well. So I think we are finished also with the short films. Although of course I would love to have more resources to make as many films as possible from the very interesting stories we could collect. And then, and currently, like this week, I should be receiving the final version of another ethnographic documentary, which is explored domestic violence in the Philippines. The Philippines is the only country in the world where divorce is not possible. It's just in no circumstances. They have tried to pass a law since a long time, and they are at the moment in the process. And this film explore using ethnographic documentary approach again around this very complex issue of domestic violence, mental health, and suicide in the Philippines, which is titled Chocolate and Roses. Now, I was meaning to show you 5 minutes of this film, but I've lost track about how much I've spoken already about, and if we have time for this. So I'm not sure.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, we do have time for this. Yeah.
I like the excitement. Okay, then. So then we'll. Okay, then let me do, because I wanted to show the excerpt from the final film, but the edit. Well, the final film. I'm also going to be talking more about this project in 2 weeks at a conference in Turkey. I'm not going to Turkey. I'm doing online. If you want to see more or hear more about it, I'll. Okay, then I shall share. Hopefully, it's going to be working with no problems, because I don't see the share of the film. Mm. There we go. Okay, now it appeared magically. Let me know. I'm gonna play it. If there is an issue with the sound or video, please let me know.
Mas may patingali nga kulatahon ka kay kausa ang sakit pero ang emotional makadaot sa imong lawas.
Violence against women is an invisible crime. It's so difficult to report it because it happens in private spaces.
Domestic violence or violence in itself has a very strong link with the mental well-being of a person. Domestic violence is a very severe trauma.
Yung pakiramdam mo, naging malaya ka na sa lahat. Malaya ka na sa kanya. Siguro sa papel, malaya ka na sa kanya. Pero emotionally, kahit papano, nandito pa rin. Kasi forever na nasa pagkatao ko yung ginawa niya.
Yung pangalawang baby namin dapat. Binugbog niya ako, nakunan ako.
Tutukan po ako ng baril. Tamparos, dako man siya.
Told me, papatayin kita, sasaktan kita.
Kami mga igsoon, wala mi mahimo, kay wala mi gisaligan nga makalaban namo.
Iya, dyan kong gibubuan ugas. Iya kong dagkutan.
The Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act, the Anti-VAUC law, was an important bill and remains an important law. Our former representative, Loretta Ann Rosales, was telling us at that time the difficulties of pushing it through the legislative process. In the House of Representatives, they weren't taken seriously. Legislators, especially the men legislators, could even afford to joke about them.
Magsulit payain ang kaisipan. Ngayon na ang panahon ng pagbabalik buwas, pagsulong ng kababaihan. Ilubos ang kalayaan kung di ka malaya. Tapos ang kasaysayan kung di ka kasama. Babae o babae, bahagi ka ng tagumpay.
A strong women's movement is a necessary condition for addressing the issue of violence against women.
The issue here is fighting for equality, for human rights.
Women are part of humanity, and their humanity should be respected, should be protected, and their potentials as people should be allowed to bloom and to prosper. And violence prevents that from happening.
Sa karahasan sa kababaihan, International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women.
I am rising for every woman I love, and my sisters who know of the pain that stays and lingers after wounds have healed, and the scars don't show. I am rising
Okay. Okay, so as mentioned, I'll be talking a bit more about this project in a conference in 2 weeks' time, which is also online, which is all about visual methods, and hopefully releasing the final film shortly. And who knows, maybe come back one day to talk about domestic violence and mental health and suicide, because they often, unfortunately, are not discussed together, but they are very strongly connected. Okay, so now I'm going to be going back to the slides. Okay, I think you can see them again. Yeah. Okay, so now just to conclude, what I'm mentioning so far is all around using visual methods for research purposes. There is also a way of using visual methods just for dissemination of knowledge transfer, and there are some examples here of projects where I've done that, but my work is very much more about using arts-based visual method throughout the research process and not just at the end. Now, in the final part of this presentation, I'm going to be talking about participatory visual methods. Now, I'm aware you already have done other presentations, you have done a lot of activities around participatory methods. So I'm not going to give a definition about what participatory research means, assuming you all know. I'm going to focus only on participatory visual methods. In particular, photo voice, potentially something that you are familiar with, is something that often people use in research. I don't know if you used them before, but is a qualitative method of inquiry, which is defined as a community-based participatory action research that provides a forum for the presentation of participant experiences through images, language, and context, which are defined by the participant themselves. And usually the objective, and that's why it's called the photo voice, is reaching policy and other decision makers, or bringing these voices to policymakers and decision makers. Now, this method seen has been developed initially in US as a participatory action research that engages participants as a photographer who capture the photo that best illustrate their perspective. Just to give you an example of a paper we're now publishing with one of my master's students, which was around exploring perspective around barriers and facilitators, so as accessing and engaging with domestic violence services among Turkish immigrant women. In the project, women from Turkish background were using photo voice as a way of describing what were the perceived barriers and facilitators. You will see a couple of examples of what were some organizational barriers that the women were giving, and the paper should be coming out shortly. You can then also look at the paper. And I just want to talk briefly about another very recent kind of project. It was a larger research project which is led by Clara Kaya in Edinburgh. They invited me just last month to go to Edinburgh. So they were working with a Syrian community in Edinburgh on a very large WHO-based project on mental health, mental health, and they wanted me to kind of try to experiment about if the community, this NGO they were working with, they would be responding to using visual methods. So I had to use photo voice, which is one of the most kind of simpler and easier to use in a short time. We only have had a few hours. Now, interestingly, I proposed to work on suicide, and I said, like, why don't we do something around suicide? And rightly so, the organization, they were a bit concerned about the topic, maybe be very sensitive, but perhaps something to work towards in the future. Interestingly, because they work in a very participatory way, they decided to ask the community what topic they wanted to talk about, and guess what topic they chose to talk about? Suicide. So we did a photo voice around what suicide recovery means to them. And it was interesting, in a very short time, we had only a couple of 2 hours and a half. The women produced a very interesting photo. You can see, I'll give you some time to read. So they in the photo voice, usually have a photograph, you give a title and a caption. So these are some of the photos and the caption. I'll just let you read. So these are two the images that they produce a response of what suicide recovery means to you, and these two more. And now we're also open to eventually do something with this kind of data we have used. Now I'm going to talk more about more audiovisual methods, which is what particularly I use, and there is different kinds. You might have heard about video diaries and audiovisual self-recording, where usually it's a kind of two-way dialogue between participant and researcher, digital storytelling, I'm going to be talking briefly about that more, as well as participatory videos. So I'm going to be focusing now in the last two audiovisual methods. What is interesting though to know is that when you work with any kind of visual data, what is data? The data is the process of creating the audiovisual digital artifact itself is data. The impact it has on the participants, in this case, is both the people who produce the audiovisual material, but also the people who witness the material, as well as the resulting artifact as an expression of the participant voice, belief, experiences, and needs. So we can see there is a different kind of data when we are talking about using audiovisual material. Now, digital storytelling, I don't know, again, if you're familiar with these methods, not knowing all of you, then I will just provide the definition, which is around the research or community engagement method that combines the cultural power of the first-person narrative with digital technologies and a facilitated workshop to support participants to explore and represent life experiences that are particularly meaningful to them. So in this project, we use the digital storytelling to produce visual stories of what recovery means to people with lived experience of mental health issues and social behavior from migrant refugee background in Australia. And this project came about because I did a literature review with one of my students, and we realized at the point, although the concept of recovery was widely used in mental health services, realistically, the literature I could find at that point was basically not based on people with lived experience. So was people with experience but actually not involved in producing the research to then be used for the theories, and also was not including people from low middle-income countries and ethnic and refugee backgrounds. So it was a way of starting collecting this kind of perspective using workshop with people from migrant refugee background for them to make themselves a short film about what recovery meant to them. This project was completely done by the participants in terms of we were supporting them throughout the process, but people decided everything about the project. You can see some photos here of some of the process that they used, and then people had to sign. Or usually the way I work in the participatory methods is about the people who produce the story. They actually own the story, and eventually they will sign a kind of permission for us to be using the stories in different platforms. In this case, we have permission from 9 of the stories to be screened to be used in the website, and I am going to now show you a 3-minute story. So I'm going to move from here, and I'm going to take this out. There we go. And you should be able to see this.
Dear little self, you were a blue child, always sick, always alone. In pain, fear, hunger, in perpetual darkness. Mom had
It was not showing so that.
Dear little self, you were a blue child, always sick, always alone. In pain, fear, hunger, in perpetual darkness. Mom had to leave with your siblings. You must have felt unwanted, uncared for. I'm sorry. Please forgive Mom. She wouldn't have survived with 5 small children and you, still a baby. Nannies took over. Fear and pain came back. You created dream people to hide behind. Someone to clothe and bathe you, feed you and rock you to sleep. Someone to chase away bad dreams, someone to play with. Sometimes they felt more real than the real people. They kept you feeling safe and cared for. That was okay. As you grew older, your needs changed, so you created different people to support you. You must have felt helpless when this cycle kept going on without any medical support or hope of rescue. You wanted to be heard, but were afraid to be seen in case bad things happened again. In case you lost time, memories, and yourself. In case you found yourself in a bus, unable to breathe, frozen in fear. The journey to find that kind voice seemed daunting, and you knew that scars fade but would always be there. Rejection, abandonment, pain and isolation, all the pressures in life may tip your bucket and make you feel like hiding again or crawling inside that bus again. You must have been lonely, being surrounded by more and more people who did not know who you really were. I'm sorry. But it's okay. We are finding real people to help us now. We will jump in a sailboat with a camera and capture our colors and our black. We will try to see the colors of life again today, on the next day, and the next. It's okay, little one. Life does not need to be perfect. Good enough is okay. Let the black mix with the colors and know that the picture looks even prettier that way.
Okay, and just saying, so there is the stories that can be found on the web, on the movement website. We will have links, and also there is three publications that are about this project, where in addition to analyzing what actually was the content of the stories and comparing what were people lived experience of recovery with what are the theories around recovery, there is also a story specifically about a Chinese participant, and then also a methodological paper explaining about this project, and also reflecting about 5 years later what the people who were involved in this project, the participants, the storytellers, I call them, who took part in this project, what was their experiences, what was they really liked, what they thought could be done differently, and if they had made any use of the stories. So you can again read more about this if you like on these papers. And now finally, I'm going to be closing soon with the last methodology. I want to just briefly talk about, of course, I cannot go in depth explaining any of them because it will take a long time. I just wanted to give you an overview about the different approaches that I've been using. So the last one is around participatory videos, defined as a set of technique aimed to involve a group or community in shaping and creating their own film. The storytellers also make their own film, but usually these are done in a kind of a group manner. But I will give you some example of ways in which I've been using this method, both to create a group story, as a shared story, as well as working in group by creating an individual story. So bringing together different methods. And also this method is definitely a very powerful means of documenting and sharing people's experiences, needs, and hopes from their own perspective. So just going back to before, when I was talking about Together for Mental Health, the project around collaboration between mental health professionals and healers. So while before going in the field, in this case in Indonesia, I ran a workshop in Jakarta, pairing the members of something called the Komunitas Peduli Schizophrenia Indonesia, which Anto is also Indonesian representative, matching the members of this organization of people who have experience of usually schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, with people with students from this university. So they were matched together to create a story that the person wanted to tell. And so while I was in the field with the research team collecting data for the Harmony documentary, which I mentioned before, people were working together in pairs to create some short films, which were then presented in a festival. And we had screenings and winners, and was behind the story of people with schizophrenia was the title given. A similar kind of approach was using participatory video was done in another project, which was exploring the stories around the impact of COVID-19 of people with social disability in Ghana, Indonesia. So with the same teams, which was an expanded, we worked for together mental health. In this case, it was Ursula Reed was leading this project. We worked in developing stories around COVID. In this case, it was an interesting approach because we started with the peer researchers, so people with experience of mental health issues in Ghana and Indonesia were trained as peer researchers, something I really am very passionate about. And so they collected data using qualitative interviews. Then, as you can see in these images, we met in Ghana and started looking about what were the preliminary findings, producing a visual map of the key themes which were emerged through the interviews with the peer researchers. And then we brought this initial analysis back in the field in the central part of Ghana. So there was visiting the participant before coming to the workshop to gain consent. And then we had different activities. I'm not going to go in depth around them, but the first day was very much around visual representations, so discussions and exercises. So people took turns in filming, doing sound, telling the stories, asking also listening to speaking, so the people could have experiences about what it means staying in these different roles, but also working together in terms of representation, how they wanted to be represented, and any issue they could have around representation before they were eventually filmed for the final films. These are peer researchers presenting the preliminary findings which came out from the visual mapping. So these were both in the field, and then every person was shared their story. So we gave people pens and posters for them to draw something around the story they wanted to tell. And again, everybody was taking turns here filming and telling the stories. So people who share, each of them shared the stories. And then participants all had stars. They could go and vote their favorite story to be filmed, as a short film. And two stories were selected. One of them is Alassane, and actually I'm very so Alassane. Then they were sketched in different kind of 5-6 scenes, and then these were enacted, were filmed, recorded, and made in a short film. Alassane film actually interesting. Just been accepted to be shown on an international film festival, which is wonderful to know. So I'm making sure that Alassane himself is informed, because it's particularly touching because Alassane, when we finished this 3 days workshop and we collected the reflections around the method that we used, he actually, what he shared with us was that this was the first time in his life that somebody had given him a pen, and to ask him to do something with a pen. And so I'm suspecting we'll be very pleased to know that his story was selected by an international audience for this festival. And finally, a similar kind of approach used more recently in Indonesia to have people with lived experience of different kind of mental health issues, sharing what is their key mental health message they want to share for Indonesia. And in this case, a small group produced different short films. And then just to conclude, I want to mention that again, with Ghana, Indonesia, we kind of build a long-standing relationship, which has been very interesting as a learning experience for all of us in terms of using art for research and advocacy. So we are now concluding this other grant, HLC Research Network, which was aimed to developing a network for mutual learning on the potential of creative arts for mental health advocacy and activism in Ghana and Indonesia. And so we are hoping to be able to also provide some kind of guidelines, reflections around using these methods in this context. And finally, currently, in UK, I am a co-investigator on a project funded also by HRC, which is titled Co-creating Assets and Place-Based Approaches to Tackling Refugee and Migrant Health Exclusion. And in this project, which is also quite a large project, we all again have peer researcher trainings. So we have been training people from refugee backgrounds in terms of be collecting the data. Myself and Elena Vakelli have been running peer researchers training with different creative methodologies, including working interviews with photo voice, audio and video diary, and also now they are doing a different kind of focus groups, community forums, using also arts-based creative methods to be able to collect more information around more data around assets. This is based in UK, and we are still collecting data. So hopefully in the future I can talk more about the findings of this study as well as the methods. So to conclude, I mean, I can say with obviously this experience I shared so far, giving an overviews, and those I hope to be having in the future, as I'm very passionate about using these methods. But what I can say at this stage is that all kind of arts-based and visual methodologies, but particularly participatory methods, enable silenced, marginalized, and disadvantaged groups to share their experiences and advocate for change, including self-advocacy, can be very empowering. They can generate dialogue between and across the sectors and disciplines, expertise, so they become a tool for different kind of people and sectors to have conversations. They can also be, therefore, can be integral in public engagement and dissemination activities in governmental health to foster understanding of lived and living experiences and related needs. So fundamentally, they are I think they have a very important role to play, both in advocacy and activism, global and cultural mental health, and suicide research. Now, as I mentioned, there's a lot of stuff I kind of wanted to kind of give you some information about, but if you want to know more about them, please go in my website, Movement. You can follow if you want to be informed about activities. You can check videos. And I also want to point to where the arrow is at the moment, together with Joe Smith and my colleague Deborah. We are working on a handbook, the first handbook of visual psychology using arts-based and visual methods in mental health and suicide research. So it's going to be like 20 chapters so far, and this book should be coming out next year. And also in the same website, you will also find, if you look, Violence Against Women coming soon. So there will be more about the short extract that I screened before. So this is where all you can find more information and more links. And so yeah, this is the end. So thank you so much. I don't know how long it took, but yeah, thank you. And now to you, Sandra and Part. Thank you.
Brilliant. Sure. There's no way to express what just happened, actually. It's unbelievable, Erminia. I mean, we did tell you directly in Sri Lanka when we met, but it's just a creation. You know, research is such a structured, one-rooted method for a lot of the time. And, you know, when we involve this lived experience, so to be introduced to your methods is phenomenal. And it really opens up doors. You speak to things such as access to communications, actually engaging lived experience authentically. Like it's to speak about things like stage consent. And it speaks to an audience outside academia, like you say. It's so much wealth and so much to learn from your methods and to share. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you coming today, sharing, you know, your beautiful wisdom, your beautiful methods, the stories, and you know, the fact that you insist through your research that the lived experience participants are firstly always participants, and that they own those stories. It's so incredible, you know. So yeah, anyway, that's just a brief thank you for that. I do want to dive straight into the deep dive, if you don't mind. I do want to ask you some questions around that. I just want to remind the audience, please, if you do want to ask questions, pop it into the chat. I'm going to ask 1 or 2 questions and open it up to the floor, so that I don't dominate the space as well. So yeah, you did touch on some of this already, but we obviously, the deep dive element, I am going to ask more direct questions. So the first question I'm going to ask is, what drew you to filmmaking and your methods?
But there are, I guess, different reasons I'm thinking about what drove me. I think one of the main reasons was I mentioned before in terms of impact. I come from a background, my father's person, he likes to learn, but is somebody who can barely read and cannot write. So, as a researcher, particular researcher has been dealing with numbers and being numbers, I've been wondering about how does somebody like my father who wants to learn, who wants to share, how does he learn? What is the way, the channel of communication for him? And in the case of my father, documentaries. He loves documentary, he likes to watch TV, like, kind of informative TV show. And I know there's many people like my father in the world. In fact, most people around the world are more similar to my father than people who are in academia, who often are very privileged in privileged positions, and are learning and are communicating at a level that most people cannot do. So that for me has been a very important element in terms of wanting to do research which could be taken outside of academia, could be understood outside of academia, but also people can apply their way of thinking. Now, as the very lovely exercise of part, that really is going to be wonderful. Because it really open my thinking. Thank you so much for that. Because like as that image, you all have also used your own understandings, your own lenses to look at that image, right? So when I make a research product, of course, we are working together as a team. We are deciding, analyzing data and this an analytical process, but we also bringing who we are, and we are bringing where we're coming from and what we know and what we learn. So then the viewers can also be engaged in the process of learning, and we can learn from each other. So that for me has been a very important element, or when I started. Then I think also it's been about what has pushed me to continue to believe in this. Is people like you, Part, my adopted child, Sandra, but also before that, Anto, and before that even Mick Eels. So the people who actually have been, people with lived experience who had the stories to tell, but these stories were not reaching academia. So like to going more chronologically, when I was still a PhD student, Mick Eels, who is an Australian fantastic artist, a ceramist, a bronze artist, he contacted me, he wrote me this email, and I could, I did not know at that point. Then later, he has written chapters about this, so you can read his work, so you can learn his story from his own writing and telling. But in my website, you also will find this film, so you can learn more about his perspective. But in short, he wrote me an email around spirituality. He was interested in spirituality and suicide. He wanted to, was an artist who wanted to use arts as a method, and yet found that nobody was interested. So it was like, and out of desperation, he written me an email and saying, okay, let me write, to this Italian PhD student. And then when he wrote me this email, I was very excited because I was also interested in spirituality. I also was finding that academic environment was not interested in spirituality. So for me, having an artist who wanted to do research, he wasn't a researcher at this stage, using arts, because of my own interest in arts as well, I was super excited. So we started collaborating, and we have learned a lot of stuff together. It's been really much about learning from each other, and each other learning about the value of using this method. And then from then other things have developed. So it's been also thanks to the people that I was very lucky to meet in my journey, and that with whom we have trusted me, and with whom we have built stories together.
Excellent, thank you. As soon as you mentioned your dad, I immediately thought of my mom and how, it would be the same kind of thing to be able to reach, that kind of, it started home. And that's what I take from that to a very large extent, and how we communicate or share, our stories together, and, from different educational points of view and things like that. So it's incredible. And obviously you speak of spirituality, you did touch on it. If I can just expand on that one a little bit, what role does spirituality play in your work?
Oh, that's a very difficult question, Sandra.
we keep the best ones just for you.
The presentation, but no, it is a difficult issue because spirituality is such a broad terms. I've wrote a few papers about spirituality, and even like what does spirituality mean, so what it means to me, what it means in my own journey. Obviously it's part of a process of growth, and so what it plays, it is something that I don't have an answer, but what I can say is that it is something that I know for people like me, like other people who have reached for me, and they expressed about how important for them is being spiritual spirituality. I know that the spirituality, religious and non-religious. So when we look at spirituality, you think for some people is part of their religiosity, but for other people is not, and it's completely outside of religious. And for some people who are very religious, they are not spiritual. So these two concepts are not the same. They are partially overlapping, but they are actually not the same. But for those people who for whom spirituality is important, both in terms sometimes of in their crisis, in the mental health crisis, on the suicidal crisis, there is often issues around spirituality which is in place, but also around the recovery. So what I found is that while spirituality can be very important for many people who experience mental health challenges, including for myself in my own life, and particularly around suicide and other issues like this, in mental health, we still don't take spirituality seriously. We might mention it, but we don't really understand how important it is, and also be able to really use this. What we're looking now is much more religious kind of based psychology, like Islamic psychology, Buddhist psychology, which is a partial recognition that these dimensions are important, but also we also to be aware, and I'm not sure that too much overlapping as well. That doesn't mean that they can also be used as a way of passing on religious messages and somehow using the vehicle. So I'm still trying to understand about what are potential values and danger of very religiously framed approaches if you don't identify as with that religion, or even if you do, if there are challenges, like often is experienced by people who are experiencing a suicidal crisis, where they might be religious, but also they are at whatever point in their life they might have a wish to die, and the challenges that they experience because of this kind of dilemmas. So this is what I can say, but something I'm very interested to keeping exploring in my life, my personal life, and in my work life. So yeah, maybe we can get back to this also in the future.
I love that. It's your work and your personal life. I'm sure there is a divide in a certain instance, but it's holistic for you as well. It comes across quite strongly. Obviously, like you say, religion and spirituality. It's quite different, but the same, and it's a difficult one to circumnavigate or to use in instances with mental health. Anyway, let's not unpack that one too much. What I do want to do is I want to go to the comments because I don't want to monopolize from my side too much. So we have a comment from Anastasia who says, what a gripping presentation, Erminia. I would like to learn more of your work and about you. I'm a poet and I have been wondering how I can use my words to promote advocacy and research too. Is there a way to contact? I think through the movement websites, Anastasia, and then she says, I value learning something from someone with their experiences, especially when it comes down to using my creativity. So thanks for that, Anastasia. I don't know if you want to say anything to that, Erminia, maybe?
I'm very approachable, so you can just write me.
We can, Parth and I can both vouch for that. So, and thank you. Thanks, Erminia. All right. Jeffrey wrote, both filmmakers and researchers struggle to raise funds for their work. You are so prolific. I noticed many of your sponsors on various projects. Are you still spending a lot of time fundraising, or has your work struck a nerve and gotten to the point funders are coming to you to offer support?
Oh, Jeffrey, I wish at this point of my life to have fun. I'm still waiting for these amazing philanthropists. I know they say there is philanthropists around the world. I still have not met anybody. Neither for my research on suicide prevention, which most of it initially done completely on my own time, my own resources, and people who have supported that their own times. And unfortunately, still a lot of it is happening today. And the arts-based work, and if you do know a philanthropist who might want to do that, that would be very lovely for all of us, so we can actually just focus on doing the work rather than getting funding for it. So my initial work, when I started working on this, like the Arid work project I mentioned, I just did it myself. I had a camera and I did it myself. Then I trained as a visual anthropologist because I realized I wanted myself to be the person doing the filming. And for Breaking the Chains, I won like a very small grant, £1,000. Sometimes you kind of have to start small, particularly when you don't not known or not have a profile or whatever. So it's more likely. I started with this very small funding from something called One World Media in UK, and then I did actually a fundraising, one of these online fundraising where you give people, like, if you give me some whatever, $10, I was in Australia, you get whatever, and so I was able to raise just some funding just to pay for the expenses to go to Indonesia. One, actually, the main funder of the project, which is credited in the film, is Ben Rinaldo. He's a person with lived experience of mental health issues, of a very important mental health advocate in Australia, and he was the main funder of this project. I want to say that because it was very important for me to see the fact that Ben himself wanted to have this movie be made. Obviously, again, I'm one of the people who then pushed me to continue with this kind of work and expanding. So that was a started, small funding, some fundraising from like small donors who gave like $10, $20, except Ben. To support this work. Then progressively just apply for a little bit more funding to organize some events. Initially I like to bring people together. I'm sure as you, Sandra, the other part do. So I started bringing together artists, people with lived experience. So little pockets, so little things here and then supporting. Then, I'm somebody who has a hope. I have a lot of hope and a lot of drive, a lot of passion. So I want to think big. So I said, okay, I'm going to apply for a UK government funding, was at the time was called Global Challenges Research Fund, to do a completely visual research project. So I had incredible people to work with, like Diana Setiawati in Indonesia, Ursula Reed working in Ghana. So I had a team I knew I could work with, and I wanted to do a project that was completely visual research, because my point was about also the funding body, the ethics committee, my own institution, believing that we can do research which is completely creative. We don't have to justify what we are doing because you're using also a survey or interviews. We can actually use this as a research method, and that was I applied, and as far as I know, that was the first project ever funded by UK government body, which actually was completely visual research, and that for me made me understand that actually it is possible to get funding. But for fundraising, getting funding for research is extremely competitive. It's getting more competitive as university, as you can see, having a lot of financial issues. There is, I believe, at the moment less interest in the research which is subversive, which is breaking the status quo in general, because people want people who just go with the wave and don't have to bring new learnings, new voices. So it is challenges. I have to apply for a lot of research fundings to be able to get once in a while. But that said, I think I can announce it. I think I can announce it because I think so. Okay, I'm not going to say the funder because I think it's not come, but we might be very soon having a consortium of 13 institutions in different countries, which is looking specifically at healing in mental health using visual methods. And it's going to be a lot of capacity building in different countries. Our time is not paid, unfortunately, so my institution is kindly paying for my time, but it's going to be a lot around using participatory methods, also in Indonesia, to be able to actually have more people using these methodologies around healing and mental health. So that should be a very big project. I think we are about to getting the final, so I can then announce publicly, and it would be lovely to have some of you, as many of you as possible, involved. And I don't know where you all are. We have 13 institutions in 13 countries, 16 institutions, and obviously not all of them, but I'm hoping we can do more work together.
Excellent. Thanks, Erminia. I think that was Jeffrey. I hope you got your answer there. I think funding is always a fun playground, isn't it? It doesn't matter what kind of work you do within the space. So yeah, thanks, Erminia. There's one more question, I think. I wanted to get to. Babuti's asking, I was wondering about the possibility of using this methodology as a therapeutic or interventionary tool for participants. It sounds like something that could evoke self-understanding and reduce self-stigma. And then she just goes on to say, thank you so much for the powerful presentation. Can't wait to learn more about your work.
Yes, absolutely. So I focus on arts-based method, but arts-based therapy, art therapy has a very much longer tradition. So different kind of arts method, and I mentioned before Jude Smith, one of my PhD students, she is an art psychotherapist. There is a very long tradition of using different kind of arts method for therapeutic purposes. I focus on research because I use art therapy as a clinician when I was a clinical psychologist, but in my work I use arts as a research method. That said, for some people, and also in our reflections we collect. For some people, taking part in this kind of project has been part of the healing journey, the recovery journey, or has played a therapeutic dimension. For some people, watching some of the films can be part of the journey as well. So there is some elements potentially to this kind of work which can also be some sort of intervention, but that is a secondary, and I don't plan for it, that I don't research that, not yet. My work is about research. But if you look art therapy, you will find. Madawi and Manvi. Oh, we've got a few people here.
Okay. Sorry, the connection came in and out there.
Oh, okay.
Had you finished your sentence, Erminia? I'm just checking I'm not interrupted. Oh, okay. Thank you. I see we're getting so many questions in the chat. I do want to mention, I know that we've got 3 minutes to the end of the session. Technically, we can extend it slightly. Erminia, I know, needs to drop off at 1:45 or 15 minutes to the hour. So happy to extend a little bit if you have time. Everybody who's attending, you are welcome to stay on. I don't want to leave the questions kind of hanging. Okay. So Madhavi says, thank you so much, Erminia. This is such an incredible experience for me and answered so many of my questions when it comes to agency and empowerment within research. I've been grappling with questions of power when it comes to ethnography and research in general, especially when it pertains to a researcher having more social power than their participants, and how we can navigate this leveled one. Seeing how well visual and participatory methods weave in agency was honestly such an eye-opener for me. It's important to have voices present and centered when we do research. Thank you so much. I'm going to jump on that one with one question that we had planned, if you don't mind. So the question was, how do you navigate gaze, power, and positionality as a filmmaker when entering a community?
Yes, another easy question at the end of the day. But I've written something about this in my paper, Breaking the Chain. So because at the moment I'm a little bit kind of getting a bit tired, so I hope to reflect even more in my writing, and also I'm writing this chapter for the Handbook of Bishop Psychology where I want to talk more about this. So the question is around how. He said the question again exactly was around my gaze.
Gaze, power, and positionality when entering the community.
Yes. Well, I mean, positionality in any research is a very important kind of reflexivity. Positionality are very important kind of issues. Particularly in my case, they are complicated by the fact that when I enter in the field, like in Breaking the Chains in particular, I really have to reflect around who am I? Who am I bringing here? Of course, I'm Italian. I mean, I am coming obviously from a privileged position because I'm coming from another country. Realistically, I am much closer to some of the people I work with than other academics because, as I mentioned, my own background, also my lived experience in my own family of several mental health issues. So there are some elements that I felt strongly connected on my kind of personal history, but nevertheless, still coming from largely a very privileged position compared to the people who are in the field. But also, in addition to this, also a complexity of being somebody who's been clinically trained as a psychologist, but also being a filmmaker and a researcher. And when entering the field, sometimes also some of the ethical decisions that I had to make were also different when I was thinking about Erminia as a psychologist, or people were introducing me she's a psychologist, or she's a researcher, she's a filmmaker, because some of the ethics around this as well are different. So it was about making some choices about, okay, who am I? I mean, I'm all these things together, but some decisions that needs to be made based on who am I particularly, or above everything else right now, or where am I going, or where is this going, and what is the objective and the main purpose of what I'm doing. So that has been, it's always a very big kind of a challenge to have. But partially also because of this reflection, I become much very interested in doing participatory work in terms of also supporting people in creating their own stories and learning from what are their own views around themselves. Although of course the method you use also allows some particular stories potentially compared to others, so, but as much as you try to be participatory, you still are making some kind of creating a setting, some kind of some kind of decision. But in the kind of work that I do, even when it's ethnographic with our teams, we always try to involve as much as possible people in decisions in terms of not only about themselves, but also about the communities and about others and about the use of film and be able to use the film themselves for their own purposes. But again, it's a very complex issues, and I'm going to be reflecting more and more. And actually, I'm very interested to also, from those of you who have written some very interesting comments in the chat, to also learn more. There's a lot of challenges I have, and also another element of my work is very much about ethics. And obviously, initially, when my PhD was in psychiatry, I mentioned I worked in medical school for 10 years, and some of the issues was around to be able even to convince that it's committed people with lived experience or living experience can make choices. Like it seems so obvious, but I can guarantee you it is not. So be able to actually work with ethics committee and in terms of how can we make sure that people can make choices, which is the best choices they can make, and obviously be able to have the capacity to make choices, but people can make choices for themselves in terms of different elements. And that kind of work is a very important work, which with this consortium I mentioned will be an element of that work, and will be fantastic to use your network as well to be able to actually have your views, because we want to make sure to have some kind of guidances so that we can help other researchers, other even filmmakers, but more importantly, because I'm working within the research, to make ethical choices which are not patronizing, because it is a very big problem about making decisions for others, but also are considering real risk of over-disclosure, particularly in some context, or not having the capacity to make decisions, and all these kind. So there is two sides, not these many sides, but there is obviously two extremes that both of them are problematic. And that kind of work, I will really welcome all of you in here with us, those of you who watch this video, and obviously those of you who are in the network, to help us to build these guidances together.
Yes, we will definitely would love to collaborate with you, Erminia. I want to quickly jump to Path. He unfortunately has to jump off the call. He's got a funding call, ironically. So I do want to just say thanks just quickly to Path. I absolutely adore working with you. You know that. Love you as a person on the whole, but just want to jump to you before you need to jump off.
Thanks so much. I think one thing I can say is that Erminia knows how much I adore her work, but then the amount of chills I got just watching both the parts, of the work that you just showed us. Because there's one aspect of coming from the lived experience lens of, we know that this is ownership at its best, right? People are able to tell their own story in their own words. And the second reflective piece was that ownership was so present in that, and that was so visible. And even in the first one, that was so powerful. I think and you've already answered that question before, what I was going to ask you mostly was about hope, that, how do you maintain hope? Because I know we've done this in the past in India, where we've applied for funding for autoethnographic filmmaking with queer populations, with drag artists. We've done it with people where we want to document cultures which are not mainstream. And again, we want to highlight things which are niche, which again require that visibility for funding. But then it goes off, and then we come back again into the work, and then it goes back again. So how do you maintain that hope? But just listening to your passion alone was answer there. So I'm just going to hold this with me, and I'm going to bug you again, you know that. But just thank you so much for your time. I think this was one of my favorite things that's happened in a long time. So thank you for this.
That's a lovely thing to say. Thank you so much, Part. All the best with your fundings. Do all to your hope. It does pay off. and being surrounded by positive people who support you and believe in you. That's also very, very important.
Thank you.
And I know you have planned a fantastic activity, which we had no time to do. I'm sorry, because I think about
no worries.
But it would be nice to do that together. Maybe one day we can, hopefully when I come in India, in Bangalore and Neemans, where I did my PhD, when I come there, perhaps we can do something like that together, face to face, which is way.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that. And thank you so much, Sandra. I think Sandra is one of my favorite people in the world, and we've known each other for what now feels like a long time, but just a year plus. And it's like just a pleasure being in this space and pleasure being with the Peer Network. So big hugs to everyone. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to drop off, but I'm going to let you connect this conversation. And once it's done, I'll come back to it as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you so much. Well, that's a pity, but yeah, obviously very happy to work with both those I've mentioned. Erminia, I'm going to go. I think there's still questions. If you don't mind, I think there's one that I've picked up that from Chiamo. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I really learned some new perspectives today. Have you thought about this audiovisual method to understand traditional mental healing? Many parts of Africa, people are attracted to traditional healers for their mental health conditions. Seeking to bridge the gap between modern and traditional methods could be more beneficial. Wondering if the challenge is at a level of communication.
Yes, Chiamo, believe. Thank you for your very good comment. I don't know if you were there at the beginning of my presentation when I spoke about my first ever project where I did, which was I was saying complementing my work, which I was doing using a mixed method approach, was an Aridoir. It was around spirituality and it was around healing. So that was kind of my beginning. So my start, really, I can say, at the beginning of my work using arts within a kind of when I was starting getting to using arts research was around spirituality, was around healing for mental health issues, in this case in a ashram in India, in Haridwar, where I was following some of the practices that were used for healing for mental health issues. So that's how I started. And then in Together for Mental Health in Ghana and Indonesia, we explored different kind of healing practices. And Indonesia was based in 3 sites representing the 3 main religions in Indonesia, in Bali for Hinduism, in Java for in 2 sites for Islam, and in Flores for Catholicism, and then in Ghana was more the kind of Christianity in the kind of center of Diana. So the kind of work is happening, and now this visual consortium I just mentioned about using visual research for healing and mental health. We want to bring together experiences in different countries. I mean, ideally, if there was more funding, more time, and more people, we could do, having many more countries. Like, India was not there because we needed to have some kind of people we could work at the time, and but many other countries. But that's the idea, is around keeping using visual methods to help us also to understand about healing, what are some potential positive aspects around traditional faith-based healing, what are also some of the issues, what are collaboration in particular. I'm very interested in collaboration because I think people in wherever, even in UK, people look for different kind of help. When people are struggling with something, or even just because of their own growth or their own journeys, they look for different kind of helps. But for me, it's important to see how can people work together. How can you hold the different beliefs? How can you hold the different perspective? How can you all completely see something in different ways and still finding a way to work together in a healing process? Because in the end, I believe that healing is a very important element of mental health, which people like myself, mental professionals, still don't fully understand and totally respect.
Thanks, Erminia. I think that was what you spoke about with the Together for Mental Health, isn't it? Yes, and Chiamo, I think I said that they were late, so they unfortunately did miss that. So thanks for answering that. Obviously, just loads of comments coming through, just with adoration, with gratitude. Yeah, I think you're going to have everybody who was on the call reaching out to you. Which is great. From a peer network perspective, we would love to collaborate and support you if and where we can. Really, like I say, it's very unique. It's something I haven't been exposed to within my work in terms of research. The methods that you use. It's very genuine. It's very heartfelt. It's very much emotive. And it really gets to the heart. So. I am going to wrap it there. I think if there are no other questions, again, Erminia did say please reach out to her through the Measurement websites if you would like to make contact. If you want to learn more about the peer network, the Global Mental Health Peer Network, you can follow us on our pages, our social media pages, or gmhpn.org. We are doing a name change. So from November of this year, it won't be Global Mental Health Peer Network. We will be known as Aves Mental Health. So please look out for that on social medias and such as well. So yeah, I'm going to wrap. Yeah, there was unfortunately another activity we didn't get to. But that's what happens when time flies and you're having fun and it's lots of right. So Erminia, such a big thank you from me for your time, for obviously putting presentation together. Again, I know Parth's jumped off, but to Parth for co-facilitating, for the activities, for the engagement, for everybody who attended today. Really, really appreciate it. I hope to touch base with you within the space. In person is always best, but sometimes, you know, visually is also good. So yeah, really appreciate it. So Erminia, I'm going to give you a last word if you'd like, and then wrap from there.
Oh, thank you, Sandra. I'm laughing because Parth, I don't know if you saw the chat, he wrote, I'm on 2 meetings at once because I just can't stop listening to this powerful conversation.
I didn't see
that. There, you know, then between things. Anyway, and I want to say no, thank you. It was lovely to meet both of you in Sri Lanka. I was very pleased for you to wanted to have me talk here, and I'm sure there will be like was a beginning of more things. As I mentioned before, this work is only possible because, you know, we come together, we support each other, and that's my way of working. I know academia is a very competitive world, and I leave this to the other people. For me, that's not the way I know that's not the way I operate and the way I like to work. So I'm very glad we have this connection. I already had a connection with Anto before, and now the broader network. And I'll be in touch with you guys because I really will need help in terms of these important conversations to have around arts and visual method. We started them in Ghana, Indonesia. We have done some work, but now we have a bigger platform, international platform that I think is the next stage so we can learn from each other and support each other in terms of making this kind of research, having more of a place and training. You know, I love training, and I know peer research, I think training is one of my favorite things to do. So I'm hoping we can meet in the future, you know, and potentially can, you know, to do some trainings.
Please. You would have a lot of excited people. It's obviously been my word of the day. But yes, Erminia, to everyone who is still on the call, thank you very much. Again, I am going to share this on YouTube if you missed any bits. And I wish everybody a beautiful evening, beautiful day. Grazie mille, Erminia. Arrivederci. And we'll see you soon somewhere. Right. Thank you. Right. Bye.
Thank you.
That was part coming in. Bye.
Bye.